Good morning, people of the shore. I am so thrilled that you're here this morning. If we've never met, my name's TJ, pastor here at the Shore Church, and my wife and I recently had our fourth child. Yes. And it's our first son. We have 3 little girls, and they are 3 little mama hens running around the house. So it's been an exciting time, and it's also been a little bit, there's 2 kinds of tired in the world, like the, hey, I left it all on the field, I'm an athlete tired, and then the, I just had a kid tired, right? And that's where I am today. But it's okay, because God's word stands, and it's going to be a great Sunday, I promise you. Now, before we go into the series, there's one thing I want to share with you. If you've been around the shore for a little while, we believe in accountability and making sure that we do things the right way. And so we have accountability for our finances, our theology, our spirituality, everything. And so in order to enhance our accountability, we've made a change at the overseer position. And if you want more information about that, I teach all through our church government and Growth Track 1.0, which happens to be tonight at 5 o'clock. So we're going to feed you, take care of your kids, and answer your questions. So if you want more information about that, go ahead. Maybe you can go online and just fill out the form real quick to let us know that you're coming, how many kids you have if you have kids, but you are certainly welcome to come. And it's practically a date night because the kids are being taken care of. You get to hang out with me for an hour, right? We feed you food. It's all good. It's what it's here for. So I'm excited for that growth track tonight. Now, this series is called Death to Selfie. Now, if you're like my 9-year-old, she read that and she goes, what's that mean, right? Like, what does that mean? Well, I think we all know what a selfie is, right? And if you don't get out much, let me explain. A selfie is a picture you take of yourself, right? And selfies have been around for a really long time. They actually put selfie cameras in your phone so you can kind of see what you look like. And typically, it's not like one of these pictures. It's like this, right? You saw the video, like you're doing one of those things. But selfies have been around a long time. In fact, as long as cameras have been around, selfies have been around. Did you know that in 1839, when the first selfie was taken? 1839. That is insane, isn't it? First selfie. The first documented selfie of a teenager comes in 1914. One of the Grand Duchesses of Russia, 13 years old, takes a picture of herself in the mirror, gets it developed, writes a handwritten letter, sticks it in the letter, and mails it to her teenage friend. That's like a text message, right? Like, smile, it just sends it out. So selfies have been around a long time. But the thought behind a selfie, well, I think that's always been around. Kind of indulging in ourself a little bit. And I think we're actually born with this nature within us to think of number one, which we are number one, right? And in fact, my 2-year-old grabbed my wife's phone the other day, and she brought it to her. She goes, Mommy, I want to take a selfie. No joke. I stopped the conversation. I was like, time out. What's a selfie? And she goes, it's a picture. I'm like, all right, proceed. You know, like you know what you're talking about. And I asked her yesterday, kind of doing like a follow-up conversation. I was like, so you know what a selfie is? She goes, yeah, it's a picture I take with McKenna. I'm like, okay, that's her older sister. And so they take selfies together, apparently, when we're not around. They like to do that. Anyway, but I think we all have this nature within us, this selfie nature within us, don't we? We all have this self-centered piece of us that gets put into play quite often. And so throughout this series, though, I want to take the attention off of ourselves and try and put it on others. And that's what this series is really all about. The first series we did this year really was about you. We wanted to make 2016 the best year of your life. Wanted to help you grow. Wanted to help you get more fit spiritually and become more teachable, if you remember that. Last week, we finished out a series that wasn't necessarily about you, but it was you and someone else. We talked about relationships. Now, this series, we're going to take you out of the equation, and we're going to see how we can affect the lives of people around us. And in order to do that, we need to make sure we get rid of the selfie inside of us, don't we? Now, selfies it's okay to have confidence in yourself. It's okay to do things for yourself from time to time, but you cannot live for you. And so if you had to pick a theme for this series, here it is. If you want to write this down, you can. It's not about me. Everybody say that with me. It's not about me. You guys are laughing because you think it's about you, don't you? All right, no. It's not about me. It's not about me. It's not about, because when I walk into church, what do I want? I want a sermon about me, okay? And when I go to the restaurant, I want it my way, right away, right now, right? And when I go to the car dealership, or when I go to the Starbucks, or when I go to work, or when I go to home, and I interact with my relationships, oftentimes it is about you, right? But if you want to grow, and you want to make this world better, and you want to bring joy into your life, we're going to have to dismiss ourselves a little bit more often. It's not about me. And that's a tough one to embrace, but one that Jesus taught about on a regular basis. In fact, in Luke chapter 15, we get this just really beautiful scenario. And it's not beautiful on the surface, but as Jesus walks through it, it becomes beautiful. In Luke chapter 15, verse 1, Jesus is teaching to a crowd of people. And there's different groups of people within the crowd. And so let's pick a couple of them out. Tax collectors and other notorious sinners often came to listen to Jesus teach. So there's tax collectors and notorious sinners. You know what the word notorious means? Like famous. They were famous for being sinners. They were famous for the bad things that they did. I don't know your reputation, but are you notorious for your sin? Like, people don't know you by name, but they know you by distance. Like, oh, I know that girl. Watch out, right? That's who we're talking about here. They were not the most righteous people in society. Does that make sense? Tax collectors and notorious sinners. They came and they wanted to hear from Jesus. And what's interesting, the people that were not like Jesus liked Jesus. The people that were not like Jesus, because he was really good, they liked Jesus, and he liked them back, and he hung out with them, and he made an impact in their lives, these notorious sinners. But look at what happens next. This made the Pharisees and the teachers of the religious law complain that he was associating with such sinful people, even eating with them. Oh my goodness. You ate a meal with a sinful person. I could eat a meal by myself, and that would still be the case, right? It's true, because we all are kind of there. But here's the other side of the group. So we have this group of people that are notorious for their sin, that are full of sin. But then there's other side that they're, so righteous, at least in the world's eyes, right? Oh, we've got it all together. We're the religious leaders. We make sure we follow all the laws. And they're looking down their noses at the notorious sinners and Jesus, who is in between them. And so Jesus is teaching in this big crowd of people, and he's got all kinds of different groups of people. And you know what? Every single one of these groups of people have a selfie that they're dealing with. Whether it's the notorious sinners, which you could probably call them self-indulgent, right? What they wanted to do, they did. What they wanted to take, they would take. What they wanted to spend, eat, drink, smoke, whatever, sleep with, whatever the case may be, they did it. They were self-indulgent. But then there was the other side. The religious leaders were looking down their noses at these sinful people. What were they? They were self-righteous, weren't they? They had a selfie going on. They were thinking about themselves and how good they look and how bad those other people are and trying to expand the distance between them. So here's Jesus in this scenario where he's got a bunch of different groups of selfies and he's teaching, and so he comes up with a way to teach all these groups of people at the same time with one story. In fact, he gives 3 stories. We're going to focus in on one of these stories. And it's a story that many of you are probably familiar with. It's called the prodigal son. The prodigal son. But in fact, there were not just one son, but there was 2 sons in this story. And so I'm going to go through the first section of it, paraphrase, because it's more familiar. But then we're going to read the second half of this story together so we can pick out some truths about the older son. Because there was 2 sons to a man. And his younger son came to him and said, "Hey, Dad, I want the inheritance now. I don't want to wait for you to die. I just want your stuff." And the father says, "Okay, I'll give you my stuff." And he leaves. And he goes and he is that self-indulgent. He's like these people, the tax collectors and notorious sinners. He goes out of his way to do whatever he wants. He runs as far as he can. He spends what he can. He has parties, drinks whatever he wants, and sleeps with whomever he wants. And a time came where the economy started to crash. A famine came, and he found himself without any money. And a lifestyle like that, once you take away the money, so you take away your friends too, don't you? And he lost all of his friends because he didn't have any money to spend. And he found himself working a job feeding pigs. And as he fed the pigs, Jesus recounts in the story that he was so hungry, he wanted to eat the same thing that the pigs were eating. He was starving. And then one day he came to his senses. One day he realized, wait a minute, this is not the life I was designed to live. And he came to his senses and he said, "My father's servants have plenty to eat, and here I am starving to death. I'll travel back to my father's house and I will ask him if I can become one of his servants. Then I'll at least have something to eat. I don't deserve to be the son, but at least maybe I can be a servant." So he starts his trek home. He starts his trek and he's covered in pig slop and smell and everything else. And from a distance, his father sees him. And his father runs out to greet him. And he goes into his story about how he's not worthy to be the son. I just want to be a servant. But look how the father responds. But his father said to the servants, "Quick, bring the finest robe in the house and put it on him. Get a ring for his finger and sandals for his feet. Kill the calf we've been fattening. We must celebrate with a feast, for this son of mine was dead and has now returned to life. He was lost, but now he is found. And I love this last line. So the party began. There's a celebration. This son that was so distant, this notorious sinner son of mine, he's so far away, he has returned home. And I think the entire time Jesus is talking about this part of the story, he's kind of leaning in a little closer to those tax collectors. And he's leaning in a little bit closer to those notorious sinners, those people famous for doing bad things. And he's saying, the Father welcomed them in when they came to their senses and began to change their life, wanted to come back into relationship with the Father. And I think in the same way that he was talking to those notorious sinners, he kind of turned to the Pharisees for the next part. And he looked at them, the religious leaders, and he said this. The verse continues, meanwhile, the older son was in the fields working, as he talks to the religious people, doing what he should. He was in the fields working. He wasn't doing the wrong thing. He was trying to do the right thing. And he turns to them and says, that's you. When he returned home, he heard music and dancing in the house. So this son is working in the fields. He gets close to the house, and he hears music and dancing. Hearing music is nothing special, right? But when you hear someone dancing, that's a party, isn't it? And you know these were not white people, right? Because white people cannot dance like that. If you come to TJ's house, you will not hear me dance. You may never even ever see me dance, right? It's just because it's just not how I am. And so you know that they were having a real party when the son got close, if he could hear them dancing from outside, right? There was a party going on. And he asked one of the servants what was going on. He said, what is happening? He says, your brother is back, he was told, and your father has killed the fattened calf. We are celebrating because of his safe return. There's a celebration, a party going on. The older brother was angry and wouldn't go in. His father came out and begged him, but he replied, all these years I've slaved for you and never once refused to do a single thing you told me to. I've done the right things. I've followed the rules. I've obeyed all the laws. And all that time, you never gave me even one young goat for a feast with my friends. Yet when this son of yours comes back after squandering your money on prostitutes, you celebrate by killing a fattened calf. His father said to him, look, dear son, you've always stayed by me, and everything I have is yours. And I love this line. We had to celebrate this happy day. For your brother was dead and has come back to life. He was lost, but now he's found. And in this story, we get to see the self-indulgent and we get to see the self-righteous. And Jesus is telling them, we need to change, to both groups. He's saying, we need to change your selfie. We need to stop focusing on you, but on the world around you. We need to change our attitude a little bit here. The selfishness of the younger son brought heartbreak to the father. The selfishness of the older son brought heartbreak to the father. Two different kind of selfish deeds, but in the same way, Selfie was still in the middle of it, wasn't it? There's three things I want to pull out of this story with you guys. And if you're taking notes, I want you to kind of write these down. In fact, this first one, even if you're not taking notes, write it down. Write it on your hand. Write it on your neighbor's hand. Update your Facebook status. Something. This is something to live by, okay? Number one, me first is miserable. Would you agree? Me first is miserable. If I look at the most miserable times of my life, it's usually because I was focused on number one, being me, right? Me first is miserable. When we get wrapped up in ourselves, our world begins to shrink smaller and smaller and smaller. Look at the younger son. Me first. So what did he do? I want what is due to me. I want my share of the inheritance. And he went off and he was selfish, self-indulging in anything he wanted to do. And eventually the lifestyle led to what? Misery, didn't it? By the end of the story, the younger son is absolutely miserable. Did it start off that way? No. I'm pretty sure he wasn't miserable from day one. In fact, day one was probably pretty fun for him. And so was day 2. And so was day 7 or maybe 14 or 6 months later. He's probably still having a good time. But eventually, the me first mentality caught up with him, didn't it? And all of a sudden, that me first mentality brought him to a miserable place. But he's not the only one. The older son, he was pretty miserable too, wasn't he? His self-righteousness led him to a place of real pain. Check it out. In Luke chapter 15, verse 29, I'm going to reread part of the story here. He says this to the father, "All these years I've slaved for you and never once refused to do a single thing you told me to. I've done the right thing at the right time all the time. I'm the good son here. I'm the one that deserves the sacrifice. I'm the one that deserves the celebration." And his self-righteousness comes out. He's saying, no, that son of yours, he doesn't deserve it. I'm the right one. And his misery is because he's so absorbed with himself. And he goes on to say, in all the time you never gave me even one young goat for me to feast with my friends. Yet, he says, when this son of yours, not this brother of mine, not this brother that I have that I'm happy he's home. He goes, no, he's not my brother, he's your son. When this son of yours comes back after squandering your money on prostitutes, you celebrate by killing the fatted calf. He's going, what's going on? And he is absolutely miserable, isn't he? He's miserable. Why is he so miserable? He's so miserable because he has a me-first mentality, doesn't he? I think a person wrapped up within themselves is a pretty small package, don't you? And people who continually take within themselves, that's something that's going to break your life and every relationship that you have if you have a me-first mentality. So the opposite of that must be true. If it's a me-first mentality makes me miserable, if I start to think of others, won't that bring more joy into my life? Yeah? Proverbs chapter 11, verse 25. It says this, "The generous will prosper. Those who refresh others will themselves be refreshed." If I want to get rid of the misery in my life of a me-first mentality, I need to start to refresh someone else. And I need to start to give to someone else. Philippians chapter 2 gets a little bit more on the nose with it, and it just goes out and says it. He says, don't be selfish. That's it. Don't be selfish. And don't try to impress others. You need to stop thinking of yourself, number one, because you are going to be absolutely miserable when you do that. Don't have a me-first mentality. Be humble, thinking of others as better than yourselves. Be humble. So many people go, well, you know what? I need to lower myself below someone else. And that's not what he's saying here. He's saying be humble and think of others as better than yourselves. Not thinking lowly of yourself, but thinking of them as greater. You don't have to lower yourself, but you need to raise them up in your life. And when you begin to raise people up around you, your relationships get better, and you begin to pour out into the world around you, and all of a sudden, you have more joy in your life than you ever thought possible. You could take this as even relationship advice. I know we just did a whole series about relationships, but this is a great, great relationship principle. Look at this last line. Don't look out for your own interests, but take an interest in others too. You will be miserable if your marriage is all about you. Well, they don't meet my needs. Well, they're not going to with an attitude like that, right? Once you start giving in a relationship, it starts to grow. The most miserable parents I know are the ones that are all about themselves. Like their kid is like an accessory to their life. Think about that. It's a miserable way to raise your kids. It's miserable. When you have a me-first mentality, you are absolutely miserable. It doesn't help you in any way. Do yourself a favor. Do your relationships a favor. And forget about your me-first mentality and start to live for someone else for a season and see if that doesn't change the way things are working in your life right now. Number two, second one, we really learn it from the older brother is this. You don't lose yourself when you celebrate someone else. You don't lose yourself when you celebrate someone else. The older brother had a fear, and I think it's a fear that we can all kind of relate to. Now that the younger son is back, where do I stand with the father? If the younger son is back, am I still the golden boy? Am I still as righteous as I once was? He's celebrating him, so I don't know, am I losing value because this younger son is back? But the truth is, you don't lose yourself when you celebrate someone else. If you're here this morning, you've been a Christian your whole life, and someone else walks in here and God does something great in their life, you should start celebrating that. Because you won't lose yourself in the process. In fact, when you start to celebrate what God is doing in their life, you'll actually gain something in the process, won't you? You'll gain. How much did the older son lose out on because he was not willing to participate in the party? He missed out on joy. He missed out on happiness. And he became miserable because he had a me-first mentality, and he refused to celebrate the younger son. But the truth is, if he would have celebrated the younger son, not only would he have not lost himself, he actually would have gained something significant in his life. And he tells the father, I don't want to go in. This son of yours, it's miserable. This situation, I don't want to have anything to do with it. But look at his father's response here. I love it. His father said to him, look, dear son, you have always stayed by me, and everything I have is yours. The father knows immediately the son is worried, but where do I stand? What about me? And he has this me-first, simple mentality. And the father's going, no. If you celebrate your brother, you're not going to miss out on anything, because everything I have is already yours. It's already yours. You don't have to worry about this person walking off the street. You don't have to worry about anything else in life, because my relationship with you is just as good as it always was. Now, you will miss out on life if you refuse to celebrate your brother. You will miss out on joy if you refuse to celebrate what I'm doing in his life. You will miss out on that. But right now, you're not going to miss anything if you celebrate with him. And that's so important. It's so important. Because your life will only be multiplied in joy if you begin to add people in. And you begin to celebrate what God is doing inside of them. Celebrating the successes of someone else. As a pastor, it's my job to celebrate the successes of other churches in our area. Because there are 300,000 people in our city that this morning are not going to church, have no relationship with Jesus Christ whatsoever. 300,000. We could fill our church every hour, all day Sunday for 24 hours and never reach half these people. Right? And we could fill all the churches in our city every hour on a Sunday and not reach all these people. We need to celebrate what God is doing everywhere so that we can all accomplish the goal. Because we want the prodigal sons to come home, don't we? And we don't want to be that self-righteous older brother that's like, well, this is my church. This is my turf. My church is better than that church, and that church is worse than this church. Forget it. Forget it. We need to have the mentality that we're reaching out to the world around us, and they're on our side, right? And we celebrate the successes of others. This church was started just over 4 years ago with an organization called the ARC, Association of Related Churches. They helped train my wife Leah and I in our ability to start a church, to be pastors. They even kicked us off with a little financial stuff to help us, like rent the school, buy some lights, things like that, to make sure that we could get going well. And about a year into the process, we were maybe 25% of the size we are now, but a year into the process, I got a call from them, and they said, hey, there's another church planner interested in Sarasota in starting a church. And before they could ever ask the question, do you mind if they come, I said, send them, because this area needs more. And even if we tried our hardest, 300,000 is not necessarily within our reach, but together we can, right? And my joy has been multiplied by more and more churches in our area celebrating the risen Lord and proclaiming his gospel to the world around us. We are doing better together than we ever could apart. We will not lose ourselves as a church if we celebrate what someone else is doing. You will not lose yourself at work if you celebrate what someone else is doing. You will not lose yourself in your family if you celebrate what God is doing in someone else's life. Do not be misled. If you criticize someone else, it does not help you. It does not make you look better. It'll only hurt you. It'll only rob you of joy. And the older son was about to fall victim to that. And the father says, wait, you're not missing anything by him being back. But you are missing out if you refuse to celebrate. We must celebrate. He says, look, dear son, everything I have is yours. We had to celebrate this happy day. For your brother was dead and has come back to life. He was lost, but now he is found. It's beautiful. Rick Warren wrote a book called The Purpose-Driven Life, and it's one of the top bestsellers books for Christian literature of all time. And so this book, I love the opening line to it, though. And so I know I read this on First Wednesday. If you were there, I'm sorry for the repeat. But I know I'm repeating myself, so I'm not crazy. Because you're only crazy if you repeat yourself and you don't know it. And so I know that I'm repeating myself, so not crazy. Okay, here we go. Here is the first line. The very first line of the book is this: it's not about you. How do you know this is not a self-help book? Because it's not about you, okay? It's not about you. I love this, though. And he could be talking exactly to the older brother right now. It's not about you. The purpose of your life is far greater than your own personal fulfillment, your peace of mind, or even your happiness. It's far greater than your family, your career, or even your wildest dreams and ambitions. If you want to know why you were placed on this planet, you must begin with God. You were born by his purpose and for his purpose. When you start to celebrate his purposes in someone else's life, your life will only ever be added to, not taken away from. But you must have the mentality, not me first, but a we first. You must get rid of the selfies that you have in order to do this. And when we begin to celebrate what God is doing in someone else, it's like a world opens up to us. And he does something incredible. And we find purpose ourselves. Third point in this, from both perspectives of both the younger brother and the older one, the first step wasn't yours, or the first step wasn't theirs. In both stories, the first step is the father's. The father is looking for the prodigal son as he returns, right? And while he was still a long way off, what does he do? He runs out to him. He says, I've been preparing for you. I've got the fattened calf ready to go. I've got the ring and the robe and the sandals ready to roll. I'm waiting for you, son. And those of us in this room this morning, if you feel like you've been the prodigal, you've been the self-indulgent, or you've been running away, doing things on your own the way you want to do them, the Father looks at you this morning and he goes, I've been waiting for you. Or you're the older son. Maybe you're like those Pharisees or whatever else, and you're afraid to celebrate someone else because of what they might take away from you. Maybe you're like the older son. Well, remember, the older son wouldn't go in. Look at it in verse 28. The older brother was angry and wouldn't go in. His father came out and begged him. He begged him. If you're here this morning and you say, you know what, I've got a relationship with God, but it's maybe not where it should be, I think the Father is looking at you and he's going, please come celebrate what God is doing in your brother's life. Please come celebrate that he was lost and that he's now found. The first step is always the Father. Always. God has always taken a first step towards you. You don't have to change. You don't have to move. You don't have to do anything. You just have to receive the love he's about to give. That's it. My favorite verse when it comes to this is Romans chapter 5, verse 8. This is the first step that he took. But God demonstrates his own love for us in this. While we were still sinners, while we were still living in the pig pen, while we were being indignant and self-righteous out in the field, not willing to come in, while we were still sinners, what happened? Christ died for us. Even when we were in a place that we didn't even deserve it, he did it anyway. Because no matter where you are, who you associate with, or what you've done in your life, he's already made the way for you to have a healthy relationship with him. And that was the point I think Jesus was trying to make in this story. He's saying, no matter where you come from or who you are or where you are, it's your job to receive the love of the Father and come back into healthy, loving relationship with our Heavenly Father. Whether you're the notorious sinner or the self-righteous, whatever. He's saying, just come into a relationship with me. And all of that is made possible because of this right here, because Christ died for us. You see, sin separates us from God. We don't have a healthy relationship. When the son left, sin separated him from the Father. When the older son wouldn't come in, sin separated him from the Father. But here's the beautiful thing about the gospel, is that God did not let that separation stand. But he sent his son Jesus to bridge the gap between you and your Heavenly Father. And when we accept the gift of his life for ours to bring forgiveness for that sin that separated us, he says we can have a pure relationship with the Father again. We can be restored and redeemed from where we once were. We can be brought back into his house, have a healthy relationship with him. And if you're here this morning, you say, you know what, TJ, that's me. I may have been close to him at one time, but I walked away. Or I've even been in church for a long time, but man, it's been a while since I actually thought, man, God, I need to get closer to you. This is your morning to do that. And the way we do that is through prayer, conversation with God. And we have this conversation with him that simply says, God, I've wandered or I've done things I shouldn't have done. I accept the grace and the forgiveness of your son Jesus. Please, please, make me new again. I want to restore that relationship with you. If that's you, I'm going to help you out with a prayer. I'm going to help you out by giving you some words, but it's not the words that matter. It's your heart connecting with his. So if you don't mind, maybe closing your eyes, bowing your heads, just so there's no distractions and no one moving around, so we can have a time right now where we can really focus on our response to God. This is a big moment for you. This is the moment where you get to communicate with God about this very subject. And here's the prayer that I would share with you. Father, this morning I come and accept your love. Accept the sacrifice of your son Jesus as the forgiveness of my sins to restore me into right relationship with you. And I know I've wandered away, but God, I want to be made new in you. Thank you, Jesus. In your name we pray. And together we say, amen.